What if a NASA astronaut left behind a map, one that still leads to a modern-day treasure hunt? In 1963, Gordon Cooper, one of NASA's original Mercury 7 astronauts, looked down at Earth and saw more than oceans and coastlines. Gordon Cooper spent more than 34 hours in space orbiting the Earth, 22 times aboard the Faith 7 mission. From that view, he believed he noticed anomalies beneath the oceans, shapes and patterns that could point to ancient shipwrecks resting on the seabed. And history tells us why that really matters. For centuries, hundreds of European ships crossed the Atlantic, sailing from Spain and other parts of Europe to the New World in search of gold, silver, and riches. Many never made it back, lost to storms, reefs, and war, leaving treasure scattered across the ocean floor. Cooper believed some of those ships could still be found. Before his death, he passed his notes and charts to his close family friend Darrell Miklos, asking him to continue the search. That decision set in motion a modern treasure hunt, unlike any other. From space to the sea, this is the story of mystery, legacy, and the search for what history left behind. Welcome to Fortitude and Flow. Darrell
Thank you.
Miklos.
Thank you for having me.
It's an honor. I've been looking so forward to this.
I appreciate it.
Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you got into treasure hunting?
I'm originally from California, and my father he started out the treasure hunting business, I guess, in 1970. We briefly moved out to Florida, where he and my uncle uh, bought a boat, and they started treasure hunting off the coast of Florida because he read in a magazine that there was treasure off the Treasure Coast, off near Cape Canaveral, which there were a lot of ships, and that's where he started. He and my uncle also got contracted as people to look for the spent booster rockets from the NASA program, and so that they went out there looking for booster rockets initially, and then ran across a shipwreck, and then they got knowing that there were shipwrecks out there. They were really after finding their first shipwreck off the Cape, they started to continue their search, and my dad introduced me to that when I was 7 years old. I wasn't able to go out with him very much at that age, but as time went on, and in the mid 70s, when I was a bit older, he allowed me to join him off the Treasure Coast where the 1715 fleet started.
Amazing. So you basically got born into this kind of
Yeah, I was
world.
drugged into it. I didn't want to be a treasure hunter. It wasn't my dream or anything. It just wasn't something that I thought of. I wanted to be a musician and a singer.
That's a totally different kind of world.
Totally different kind of dream. And I was a surfer. I was an avid surfer because I grew up in California, which made me, my love of water was amazing. And so I figured, well, if you let me surf when you go treasure hunting, I'll join you, because what, unbeknownst to many people, my dad was a treasure hunter, but he was not a swimmer. He couldn't swim. So he was deathly afraid of water. And he kept that a secret and made everybody believe that he was a diver, but he actually wasn't.
Okay, because I think that being afraid of water while you are a treasure hunter, that might be a little bit difficult.
Well, it depends on who you're working with. That's why he partnered up with my uncle. My uncle was a fantastic diver, so he would do the diving, and my dad would do the directing. And, I know, believe it or not, there are quite a few treasure hunters that don't dive. You'd be
Yeah?
surprised how many don't dive. They'll run the boats, they'll coordinate the operations, and they'll be in charge of financing or marketing. But as far as diving, a lot of them don't dive. You'd be surprised how many of them there are. And my dad was one of them.
But he did find a lot of seen in
Yes,
the
yes, with
episodes.
the help of me and my uncle.
Okay, that's really cool. Because it comes, they say in the series that he learned from the old timers back in the 40s, this profession. So,
Well, he learned from people that were in the group. We were old enough to dive in the 40s, which is true. He met a few of them, but most of the people that he worked with were Kip Wagner, Gordon Cooper, and Gordon Cooper and Kip Wagner were partners. So that's how that relation started. And then in 1977, my dad did a show called Merv Griffin, and he and Gordon Cooper were both guests on it. And after that show, they became really good friends. And so I saw a lot of Gordon Cooper at our house in California. He would visit, and I was awestruck by him because I was thinking, oh my God, that guy's been in space. He's an actual astronaut. Um, and as time went by, I got to know Gordon much better in my 30s. My dad and Gordon had a falling out in between the 70s and the mid to late 90s. And then I connected with Gordon, and my dad reconnected with Gordon in the Bahamas in 1977. And from that point on, I remained Gordon's good friend up until his passing in 2004.
you know, I've that's what's going to be my next question, basically. Gordon Cooper seemed to be a very amazing kind of person, and like you said, he was one of the first who were picked up for the NASA program. And who was he as an astronaut, but also as a friend? And I know he meant a lot to you, and you have a very good connection, a good relationship.
I did. As a matter of fact, when at the end of our trip in the Bahamas, we were actually trying to get a lease out there for diving and shipwreck. And the Bahamian government had a moratorium, so they weren't issuing new leases, even though we tried with Gordon's influence and all of that. They weren't having it. So we ended up leaving the Bahamas after about 6 months. And then I told Gordon that I had another business that I was trying to start up, and I was looking for office space. And I told him I lived in LA, and he goes, "Well, why don't you just come stay with me? I've got extra room." And that's how he and I started our friendship. And then as my friendship with Gordon grew, my dad's friendship with Gordon just kind of like separated, as well as my relationship with my father. So Gordon kind of filled the role of a surrogate father to me, and he was wonderful.
That is wonderful. I think every man needs to have a father figure in his life. It's very
Absolutely.
important.
Yes.
Is there anything you can? What did Gordon share with you about his time in space and the anomalies he saw there? You probably
Well,
did talk about.
basically, he was up there for the purposes of looking for nuclear threats, because this was in 1963 during the Cold War, the height of the Cold War. And uh, as you may know, that they were moving nuclear bombs or large arms from Russia to Cuba, and there's lots of islands over there. So they were looking for maybe hidden missile silos that were aimed at the U.S. And funny enough, when I was visiting the Turks and Caicos Islands, there was one there, but it was the Americans, and I'm
Okay.
sure it was aimed at Cuba. But yes, they had one in the Turks and Caicos. It's no longer there, but it was there, and I imagine the U.S. had many of hidden missile silos all over the Caribbean as well as Russia. But when he was up there, he was looking for anomalous large magnetometer readings that would make it obvious that there were large metal contents within an island. And while he was up there, because when Gordon was training to be an astronaut, he trained off the coast of Florida. So what he would do is, water was the closest thing to training in space. So they would do a lot of training in the water. And he made friends with Kip Wagner in the area, because Kip Wagner lived not too far from where they were training. And they became good friends. And Kip Wagner told him, "Look, I'm a treasure hunter. This is what I do. There's a lot of treasure a little bit south of here." And so Gordon Cooper was actually an avid treasure hunter before he even made it into space. And that's how that started.
Okay, so he was into treasure hunting before, yes. So
Yes, and that's why when he went into space, he knew right away what he was looking at, that obviously they weren't big enough anomalous areas to be missile silos. But he wasn't a dummy. If you know the Spanish thoroughfare that they used to go back and forth from Europe to the New World, you would identify shallow reefs. You knew there were shallow reefs there, and if there was something odd about that shallow reef, you could see cannons, you could see large ballast piling. He knew that those were shipwrecks, and so he took those. He took pictures of those. That's where most of the information came from, was his flight using a camera. But there was on his first flight during the Mercury mission, they used a magnetometer, but the purpose of that was to look for hidden nuclear silos. Um, and it wasn't, it was still being tested. And on the show, the engineers that built the capsule said that there was no magnetometer used. But before his death, one of the engineers called me and told me, look, I had to sign an agreement where I had to keep it a secret, but yes, there was a magnetometer attached to the capsule, and we were testing it. So he did verify that before his death.
wow, it's an incredible.
Yeah, because in the show I meet I think there's 6 engineers,
Yes.
and they each had a specific job, and they told me that the magnetometers where the telescope was on the previous mission on Mercury 8. And there was a telescope that came out of the capsule for whatever reason. They were using that, I guess, to get better shots of things in space or planetary photographs that they wanted. They took that camera out and put a magnetometer there because the Russians were testing a magnetometer of their own. And so the US obviously wanted to make sure they weren't far behind the Russians in technology. So that's when they first started using it.
So that basically the mission was to find nuclear sites.
Yes.
That was very secret back then.
Yeah, but while he was up there, he goes, my God, I'm the only man in space right now, and I'm looking at what I think are shipwrecks. And so he would drop down the coordinates and figure out, or he identified the islands. He would check the reef, and then he would just make a note of those reefs because he frequented the Bahamas a lot. So he knew exactly where he was, and it it didn't take a genius, although he was one. But it wouldn't have taken a genius to know that those were shipwrecks on those isolated reefs out in the middle of the Caribbean, because the water's so clear you could see through it. And especially if you had a good camera, you could take good pictures of it. So he took hundreds of photographs and identified shipwrecks via space. And then he drew what we refer to as the treasure map from space by taking that information. He and Kip Wagner put together this map that was about 4 feet wide and 3 feet, or 4 feet long and 3 feet wide, and they jotted down every area that he believed there were shipwrecks in. And then he went and investigated each one of those areas that he had time to do, and he would make files with them. And in the story, as in Cooper's Treasure, I didn't have the map, but I had the files. My dad had the map, but he didn't have the files. So you can't, without the two of them together, it would be too hard to figure out exactly where the shipwrecks were. So that's why in Cooper's Treasure, I go back to my dad and I tried to work with him. I actually wanted to work together with him, but he didn't want to work with me. He thought that I was taking away the limelight off of him. And all I wanted to do was work together. Since he had the map and I had all the files that Gordon gave me in the office, I figured we'd work together, but he just wasn't having it. So
now it seems to be a quite difficult relationship, if I can say so. Yeah, it shows from this series.
It was really difficult, and it was his own fault. I mean, I have to put the blame where it is. He should have been more of a father figure, and he shouldn't have felt like he had to compete with me, because I surely wasn't competing with him. I was just trying to be logical. And I figured if he wasn't going to do it, then I'll just do it on my own. And for whatever reason, he gave me the map because I guess he figured that what people don't know is in the show that when we had that meeting, when we first met, I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And I just suddenly show up at his house and he's doing an interview and he thinks they want to do a TV show about his life. And goes, "What are you doing here? How the heck did you, why are you here?" And then I tried to explain to him that I set this all up and he didn't believe it. He thought that they had discovered him and they wanted to do a story about his life. But what he didn't know is they found me and I told them about my father. They went out to see him and set up the meeting secretly between me and him. And he wasn't having it. He thought that I was trying to steal his TV career. And I said, "No, Dad, I'm the one who set this up. But now you didn't see that on TV. But that was the discussion we had, and he was really upset when he found out that I was the one who initiated all this, and the cameras wouldn't even have been in his house had it not been for me." But then I think the reason he gave me the chart in the end is he figured, well, shoot, if I don't do this and I don't give him the map, then there's no TV show, which he wanted to be on. But then he just was very difficult throughout the process and very hard to work with, not just with me, but with everybody else that was involved. And you saw the tension that took place because of that.
Yeah, they have had a big ego, you can say.
Yes, exactly.
But the charge that actually eventually led you towards the Columbus Trail and the Pinson Brothers ships. How did that connection first appear? I know you went to Sevilla, and then to Jerez de la Frontera to have the translation there. And why is Columbus era so important for people who don't know?
Well, because now Columbus may not have discovered America. That was America Vespucci. It's obvious there if people really check their history. However, Columbus was the first person to actually take and cross the Atlantic, or the large pond, they call it, and go into the New World and try to establish himself as a Navy admiral and on behalf of Spain. And so he was very successful. And because of his attempts to go back and forth from America to back to Spain, it was the initiation of all of the history of the Spanish coming to the New World and taking all the silver and the gold and killing millions of people in the meantime. And I guess that's why it's so important. To me, that's the reason why it's so important, not so much that he was one of the first to discover or knew parts of America, but the fact that, I wanted to tell the true story that Columbus was not my hero because of him and people like him. Millions of people, indigenous people, were killed out of greed. And funny enough, I live here in Spain. You're there in Malaga. I'm here where it all started. So, and you can see if you go visit the palace, the royal palace in Madrid, and all these other palaces spread throughout Spain. It makes you know exactly the quantity of silver and gold they brought from the New World to here in order to build these enormous palaces that were built on ego and self-centeredness by the Spanish, and they just love to adorn themselves with riches. Well, I don't know really what they did for the people, but the church and the royal crown and the monarchy were the people that made all the money, because on one side of a coin you got the shield of the king or monarchy that was in power at the time, and on the other side you had a cross, a Spanish cross, which represented the Catholic Church, and both of them were getting rich by murdering millions of people and making them slaves to bring all of that over here. But also, if you look at all the churches, the Catholic churches, that stuff wasn't built with money that they got out of Spain. That stuff was built from money that they got from the New World. So looking at the size of the cathedrals that are spread everywhere over here in Spain, as well as all the royal palaces that they have all over Spain. It gives you an idea of just how wealthy uh, the Americas were with silver and gold. And to know that, a large percentage of that stuff never made it back to Spain and sank in the Caribbean because the main thoroughfare was from Mexico to Havana, Cuba. From Cuba, they would either load up or with more gold and silver. It was either a drop off point or a pickup point for treasure. They would either bring hordes of treasure from Mexico and South America, leave it there in large vaults in Havana, and then come back later, fill up their ships, and head back to Spain to give it to the king and the Catholic Church. And that's why there was so much treasure. And then you got the 1715 fleet that sunk. You had hundreds of thousands of ships, and we're talking centuries of this going on. So people have been recovering treasure from lost shipwrecks since the 40s.
Yes.
That's 80
Yeah.
years. But the amount of ships that went through for at least 300 years, let's just call it 300 good years. Imagine how much treasure was lost because they weren't used to shallow water, because out in, as you know, off the coast of Spain, it's deep water. So when they came to the Caribbean, they named the Bahamas Baja Mar, which means low seas in Spanish, and that's where the name Bahamas came from. Bahamas, Baja Mar. And they weren't used to that. And as soon as the wind started picking up, you couldn't identify where the shallow reefs were because it all looked the same color and it was all white caps everywhere, and they would just run across these. But, the Spanish knew they were probably going to lose 15-20% of the ships that were filled with treasure on their way back to Spain. But look, that means that minimum 80% of them made it back and built all the churches, the cathedrals, and the palaces, but the 20% is still in the waters all throughout the Caribbean.
It's so much who have not been discovered yet then. And
Yes, that hasn't been found. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
And it's like gold and silver has been the most valuable artifacts, you can say, throughout history. And it's because
Throughout recorded history, it goes back to Egypt. Look at, they adorned the pharaohs' coffins with gold, and who knows that maybe even civilizations previous to the Egyptians. I mean, sure, gold was. It's just something that's been adored by man forever, as far as we know.
it seems so. And the gold prices are very high today, and the silver as well because of the economy. But a lot of people don't know that gold and silver are actually created in the universe when there are explosions there. So it's
Sure.
nothing. It's not a material that grows on Earth. That is why it's so valuable. And
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true. And then, but imagine how many impacts of meteors had to land on Earth for that much gold to be here. And so, yeah, the world has changed over the millions of years. And that stuff just got mixed up in the tectonic plate movements and went underground, and everything that fell on Earth became part of Earth. So, yeah.
exactly. And I was thinking as well, Sir Francis Drake in The Golden Hind. In season 2 of Cooper's Treasure, you follow the trail of the Golden Hind. And that was also when the English starting to come over to the New World. And they robbed the Spanish, and they were really going at it. They wanted to find all the treasures. So that's very interesting, that type of story. If you can go in a little bit into that too.
Yeah, well, the Bahamas became trading grounds for people from Europe. And then once the English heard about the success the Spanish were having, of course they wanted a piece of it, including the Dutch. And then later on, even Americans were coming into the Caribbean to try and figure out how they could get this wealth. Uh, First, I'm sure they were trying to figure out where they were going to go to the gold mines in South America or Mexico, but it probably was harder for an Englishman to learn Spanish that since the Spanish were colonizing the whole area. So they figured they would just rob them on their way out, with the gold and silver. And that's where the pirate, in the early 1600s, the height of the pirate age, the age of piracy is why that started, because the English figured it's a lot easier just to steal from the Spanish than it is to go in the mines and try to figure out how we can make our own coins. So that's how that started. And, Nassau, Bahamas was one of the largest colonies of pirates in recorded history. And so it's pretty amazing. And they used to steal arms from each other, because some of the times when you find cannons, you're able to identify that, oh, that's a cannon from a Spanish galleon. Well, not necessarily so. It could have been on a Spanish galleon originally, but was stolen by the English and put on their ships. So the only way to prove that that Spanish cannon was on an English ship was to find something else associated with the English, like the coins or artifacts that only the English would be carrying versus the Spanish. So it's pretty interesting.
And back then also, because the English were pretty smart about it, because they formed the Navigation Act, and then they starting to create laws that if you want to trade with us, you're going to do it on our terms. And you
Yeah.
can a little bit see the way how the US and the petrodollar and the system today are creating that advantage that we are the superpower.
Yeah.
And as you know, England became the superpower. I think they had like 92% of the sea around the world. They more or less were dominating.
Yeah. Well, there's tons of English shipwrecks in the Caribbean. There's more Spanish than English because the Spanish were there longer, but there's tons of English influence, as you may know, all over the Caribbean. The islands, a lot of them are controlled or overseen by England to this day, including the U.S., who the English and the U.S., when they became friendly with each other and they started sharing this, and nothing's really changed. Everybody's wanting control, and
Yeah.
mostly, unfortunately, the Spanish, well, I don't know if it's unfortunate. They already made their wealth by stealing so much, but unfortunate for them, the English started to take over the Caribbean, and the Spanish were kind of pushed out. But
Yeah.
the heavy influence of the Spanish in the Americas still exists today. I mean, you've got Central and South America, and everybody's speaking Spanish. So that shows you the influence over there. And if you see all the cathedrals and churches that were built, I had mentioned about the cathedrals and churches and palaces that were built in Europe. That's obvious here in Spain. But if you go to the New World, they're spread everywhere. The amount of money that was in the New World was insane. The amount of slavery and human abuse of people had to have been, if everybody's complaining the way people are treated today, imagine back then. It must have been horrible.
It must have been horrible because it was the first stage of the imperialism and the colonization everywhere. And like you said, the slave labor, and that was hard. That was totally different. And it is today. At least we have laws now and things. But back then, people were just taking and stealing. And like you said, they must have had so much gold over there and silver, because when you think about it, Europe is built on that riches that was taken.
But if you get Mexico is one of the richest countries in the world, speaking with regards to minerals and natural resources. Mexico could be an incredible superpower today if it wasn't for corruption. And unfortunately, most of the South American countries, including Mexico, from Mexico all the way down, the corruption is part of the culture, but that culture came from Spain. So,
Exactly.
and that culture just moved from Spain to America. And it's still today,
Still
in my
going on.
opinion, that way. Now, come to realize America and England and all these other Western countries, we're not that far behind them as far as corruption goes. But I don't want to make the show about politics. But it just goes to show you man hasn't changed. And really,
Exactly.
the people that we associate corruption with most, and that being like the Central and South American countries, Actually, there's so much different types and styles of corruption today. Today, it's just done with a different spin, but every country is corrupt in its own way. It's just part of human behavior. And it
Yes.
has started way back then in early colonization and hasn't changed really. It's just got a different type of clothing.
I totally agree. It's totally like that, but
Yeah.
it is. And I was thinking the hunting origins when it comes to treasure hunting. Kip Wagner is very important. He helped uncover the 1715 fleet wreck sites of Florida in the 1950s and 60s, and essentially helping launch modern commercial shipwreck treasure hunting. How important was this discovery in shaping the modern world of treasure hunting?
Well, it was probably one of the most important because even today, they're still bringing up millions of dollars worth of treasure off of what they call the Treasure Coast. It's more than 40 miles long. 10 ships sank there or were violently pushed against the reefs and broke up, and a lot of that stuff. And they weren't just one area, it was spread over 40 plus miles. And as of today, they still haven't located 5 of them. One of them made it out, and then 10 didn't. 5 are still unaccounted for. So if you imagine that one of the most expensive coins was the Spanish Royale, which was a gold coin larger than most 8 escudos. Um, and that coin was minted specifically for the king, not to be in circulation in public, but for him to give as gifts to his elitist friends. And those coins are the only ones of its kind that I'm aware of that sank in the Caribbean and off the coast of Florida. And those coins are going anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million, depending on the quality. And I think they've only found 30 or 40 of those coins, and there are probably hundreds of them, if not thousands, that they were going to bring back to Spain and give to the king so that he could gift them to all his friends.
We really need to get out on a new expedition soon, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. It's so incredible to hear about this. I love
Yeah,
it.
and that's why the 1715 fleet was so incredible, because of the discovery. I mean, Kip Wagner he lived in a little small cabin off the beach there, and he was walking on the beach one day and he saw these black things, and he would just pick them up, throw them back in the ocean. Then he realized what he was throwing in the ocean was actually silver coins. That's when it dawned on him, oh my God, I'm throwing treasure back into the ocean. He then became a treasure hunter because he wasn't a treasure hunter in the beginning. I mean, how many people who really started the business weren't treasure hunters in the beginning? It just happened by accident or sheer happenstance. That was the case with my father. That was the case with me. I wasn't born a treasure hunter. I was pushed into that lane and decided to go that way because of the excitement, my love for history, and to do something different rather than just a normal day job, which I never was the kind of guy to do a normal day job. That's why I wanted to be a musician.
Yeah,
Because
that's not normal either, I can tell you
no,
that.
but I figured, okay, treasure hunting is so good. But Kip Wagner, having found that, my dad purposely, I remember taking us on the beach trying to meet Kip Wagner. And he would purposely walk in front of his house. And, my mom was a very young, pretty lady, and he would try to use her as, and then Kip was out there, and my dad would wave, hey, sir, how are you? And then go up to him. And that's how he met Kip Wagner. And then he'd bring us kids and go, oh, this is my family. And I'll never forget, my dad used to take us on the beach and sell, I'll give you 25 cents for every Oreo cookie looking rock you see. And we would go, oh, that's great. And we would just find these things in the mangrove, down by the water, all over the beach. And we'd just give them to my dad, and he'd give us a quarter for each one. And a quarter back in 1970 was a lot of money to us, especially being kids. And so that's how we started out. So we were all treasure hunters and we didn't even know it.
That's a good way to get you hooked, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And I think we need to talk about Mel Fisher and the torture discovery as well, because history in the Spanish galleon Nuestra Senora de Atocha, found by Mel Fisher in 1985 after 16 years of searching. What does that discovery represent in the world of treasure hunting?
Well, it's probably one of the most famous discoveries. there's a really weird backstory to that. Mel Fisher, so Kip Wagner used to own the lease to the 1715 fleet, and then he got out of that and he sold it to Mel Fisher. Mel Fisher became the leaseholder for the 1715 fleet. My dad used to know Kip Wagner. When Mel Fisher took over, my dad met Mel Fisher and said, look, I'll buy all your coins. Take them to California. My dad would sell coins, and that's how my dad became rich, by selling treasure, because everybody knew what treasure was in Florida, but nobody knew about it in California. So he could even get more money for each coin in California, because people would go, oh my God, that's almost alien to them. And so he would get top dollar in California. And so he and Mel Fisher became good friends. And then Mel Fisher gave away his lease or transferred it to somebody else and decided to go look for the Atocha down off of Key West in the Marquesas Keys. And since he was friends with my dad went down with him. And they were really good friends. They had very similar personalities, both A-type personalities. They were very good salesmen. They could sell you, ice to Eskimos, as they say. And eventually their personalities clashed. And so my dad ended up trying to get his own lease where Mel Fisher was searching for the Atocha, and a battle ensued between them, and it got ugly. There's a lot of other details to that.
Okay.
But I'm not sure I want to go over it on the podcast, but it was an ugly relationship, and I actually dove down and found one of the anchors before our departure from there. And then in Cooper's Treasure, I went and did full circle. I ended up going back to the Fisher family. Obviously, Mel had passed on in 1995, and I got to dive with them on the show. And it felt like a good closure to the stories. We let the bad stuff that happened before be bad. And I can't blame Mel Fisher for what happened to us, because my dad had so many difficult qualities, so you never know who was at fault. So I didn't want to get in a fight with anybody. I made friends with the Fisher family, and we're still friends today, and there we have it.
That's
But it was a
wonderful.
very important wreck, because more than $400 million worth of treasure was found. There's still stuff down there. But today it's getting harder. It's getting more expensive to do recoveries, and I don't know that they're bringing up a whole lot of more treasure today. Maybe a piece here and a piece there, but it's almost not cost effective anymore.
No, okay, it's not. No. That's actually as well. I need to follow up with that. When you are under the sea, you are diving, and you discover something. Can you try to describe that feeling? There.
Well, first off, if you're metal detecting and your metal detector goes off and you wave your hand or you move the sand and you find something that's silver or ornate, and gold, obviously, it's just like you can't believe that. The thing is that that what that piece of silver. I'll go back to the silver and gold versus other artifacts. Other artifacts are fantastic. You can find all sorts of shipwreck artifacts that are amazing. You know, pottery, plates, spoons, flatware, all sorts of or hardware on the ship, cannons, rail guns, pistols, swords. All of that is really cool. But when you think about the coins, you know that was the root of all the evil, if you want to call it,
Yes.
because what that one coin represented was what I was talking about in the beginning of this: the slavery, the takeover, the killings of millions of people, um, and it just shows you the history and the hands that coin had to pass through, from the slaves that mined the silver and gold to the slaves that had to make those coins by hand striking them, the people who worked for the crown that were beheaded if they made a mistake, in the accounting and all of that, the ugliness of it all. Not just the beauty of the coin, but the ugliness of the
Yes.
story is probably what fascinates me most. And to be touching that, knowing that the last people that actually held on to these are dead as well from a hurricane. So there's a lot of death and sad stories associated with these coins. So I may feel happy that I found it, and but touching that, knowing that what that coin cost as far as human lives, to me is the most fascinating. So
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because, like you said, it represents so much blood and so
yes,
much
it is
sacrifice.
blood money.
Yeah.
Like blood diamonds. This is blood money.
Yes, it is because the way it was in that type of system, it
Yep.
was all about getting the most out of it and for
Right. They
any
weren't
cost.
making pretty coins to show off to people. It wasn't artwork. People died for that stuff.
Exactly.
Horrific deaths. And then the
Yes.
people on the ships died horrific deaths because, in part, most of those people were slaves. Two, because most of the crew members on the ships were purposely hired because they couldn't swim and they were desperate Europeans trying to make a living. And so, imagine dying and drowning in a sea when you know you can't swim. Only the captains and the first mates were swimmers because if anything went wrong, they'd be able to be saved and continue on with a new ship. But it's death and mayhem everywhere associated because of those damn coins. And
Yes.
that's why it's so fascinating to me. And to touch it and go, ooh, I don't know if I want to touch it, but it's so much history right there. You can't help but want to touch it and feel it and know the history behind it. And the it's just a coin that represents greed.
Yeah, definitely it is. But I think it's important that it's so much, like you said, it represents also history, and it's so much history that has not been found yet. And
That's
we,
true.
if we can find those type of things, we can also understand where we are from, where we come from,
Yeah.
and I think that's important too.
Yeah.
What what can we learn from Mel Fisher, 16 years of search when it comes to the modern treasure hunting? That kind of like
It
paved the
just
way.
goes to show you gold fever is still alive today as it was back then. People are still today hunting treasure, hoping to strike and get it rich. And I can't say that I've never felt like that because obviously I would love to make a huge, significant find and gain some financial freedom from it. However, it's not my main goal in life. That's one thing I learned as I've gotten older: is money isn't everything. Because if you make money your sole purpose of living, then then you become just like the people that you complain about all the time. So,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Uh, but it's still, Mel Fisher was those guys. They just never gave up. I give it to him for the energy uh, and the drive that he had. And he was a go-getter and probably one of the most flamboyant treasure hunters to be around. He was fun. He was always drunk, though. So,
Oh, I did not know.
oh, yeah. Then I never met Mel Fisher where he didn't smell like a bottle of rum. So, that's probably one of the reasons why he was fun, is because he was always drunk and happy, and whether before his success and after his success. And so and that usually tends to happen to a lot of people back in those days. A lot of people drank, and it was just part of being a treasure hunter, because you're kind of like a modern day pirate. Like today, Spain would call us pirates because they think we're stealing their money
Which
that
they
they
stole.
lost. Huh? Which
Yeah,
they stole and
come
killed
on.
millions of people for.
Exactly.
So,
Unbelievable.
yeah. But today, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is all treasure hunters are given a bad name by the academic society and the scientific community because we're all greedy, drunken pirates and we're just there to get rich. While the schools and the academics and the scientific community, what they forget is we're not dumb. They're getting rich off of it. UNESCO is making millions and millions of dollars by signing contracts with these poor, impoverished countries in South America, offering $250,000 to take over control of everything from the Spanish colonial period, where in some cases, they really do well taking care of some of the properties, like the old forts and things like that. But on the other hand, they're in it for the money too, because they get special government grants from the UN, and it's all about money.
It's all about money.
Yeah, and they hate us because we made money before they did. Before treasure hunters, nobody in the scientific or academic community was even thinking about going and diving for shipwrecks and salvaging and recovering history. No, nobody was thinking of that. And then it wasn't until people started getting successful at it that the government, I call it the government, government entities, comes in and goes, God dang it, how can we get in on that? And we need to take that stuff over, make a bunch of laws and rules where those crafty thieves or pirates, modern day pirates, can't get rich off of this. Let's figure out how we can put a shiny coat on it and make us look all fresh and scientific and academic. We'll give that spin, and then we'll make all the money. And we not only will we make money with the stuff that we find, but we'll make money by all these grants that the government's giving us. So again, mankind hasn't changed in any way in any community.
Not at all. It's just different.
Yes. And they refused to work with us. I tried to bridge that gap between the scientific or academic community and said, look, I have been given these charts that when Cooper's Treasure was on, everybody was watching it, including the academic and scientific community. I wanted to bridge that gap and say, look, we're not all thieves and pirates, modern day pirates, and drinking rum and bringing women on the boats and stealing the treasure from Spain or however you guys want to label it. How about I give you 100 shipwreck locations, because I have thousands of them given to me by Gordon Cooper. Let me go on a few of these expeditions with you, and all I want is the credit for having found it and discovering it and having donated it to you guys. In behind closed doors, that's fantastic. That would be amazing. In front of the cameras, we will never work with a treasure hunter because they're thieves. But behind closed doors, they would say, if I decided to work with you, Darrell, I'd be fired and blackballed for ever accepting that offer from you, even though that's the most generous offer anybody's ever made to us. Just because we're working, we would be labeled as contradicting ourselves because we've put such a bad name on all treasure hunters, you included, Darrell, that if I was to all of a sudden join forces with you, well, what happened with all the bad stuff you were saying? What made you work with this guy? But they don't think of it like that. They could have. They could have. I could have given them so many locations. They wouldn't have to wait for UNESCO to give a poor country 250 grand to go get and take it over that way. I'm just giving it to you guys. Come on, let's bridge this gap. Let's see if we can find a happy medium between us and you. And they wouldn't take it.
Wow, that would be the best if we could. I mean, then it will be discovered more things.
Of course,
for the whole world to share.
Because a lot of them would say, and I know a lot of scientific guys that said, I would rather let history rot at the bottom of the ocean than to let a treasure hunter be involved in the recovery of that.
That's just horrible.
Some of them put that in print.
That's just horrible. And then it's like, it's just the ego again. And
again, that's exactly what it is.
Because that's going to be my next question, and you already shared a little bit, but how do you, the bureaucracy when it comes to these type of things, like you said, will the governments support you, or will they actually make it harder for you to go out and do this?
It's getting harder and harder every year. Treasure hunting is a dying industry. If my children wanted to be treasure hunters, I would go, no way, pick something else. This isn't going to work. You give it another 10, 15 years, UNESCO and all these organizations I just spoke of will control it all. It'll never happen because less and less, they're putting a lot of pressure and influence on these other countries that are still issuing salvage leases. They're putting a lot of pressure on those countries not to do so. And in some cases, some people had leases, and then these academic institutions came in, put pressure on the government, and they figured out some loophole in the system to push the treasure hunters out, even though they had a legal lease before these academic institutions came in. and they figured out a way to get rid of them. And then you can't fight an institution with money from governments because they just have deep pockets. So
They always win.
always win, and
Yeah.
they are winning. You try to get a lease in the state of Florida now, a new lease. Impossible. Impossible. It'll never happen. I don't know anybody that's gotten a new lease in the state of Florida. You may be able to go and get a lease to survey and look for it, but once you found it, good luck for them to try and give you the rights to salvage it. It's not going to happen, and it's just the way of the future. So I feel sorry for the kids that are actually studying marine archaeology, because there's no job sector for them, because the governments are not allotting enough money or wanting to put enough money into having groups of kids and pay for an actual treasure hunt or expedition. So
But
most of the marine archaeologists, students that grow up with that degree, are just working in offices doing nothing.
yeah, and writing, I know they write a lot of papers and stuff. But to really go out in the field, that's what they want. That's why they did study it in the first place.
Right.
And I was thinking, because when you're saying this, it's like, if a treasure hunter go out and you get the lease and everything, how much of the treasure will can you find keep
Well,
yourself?
for
How does it work?
the first instance, in the state of Florida, there's a group that own the entire Treasure Coast, and the government, the state of Florida gets 20%, and they get 80, which would never happen today, because now in the Caribbean countries, most are 50-50.
Okay.
It used to be a 75-25, 75 to the salver, 25 to the government. That was the standard in the Caribbean. Now it's 50-50. And in the case of Florida, but because it was grandfathered in, so it was a contract that was drawn up years ago, they have not deviated from the 20%, which is actually pretty fair. The only thing unfair is they're not issuing any new leases in the state of Florida. The only people that have it are those guys. And so 20% goes to them, and then those people subcontract. Like, let's just say the owner of that lease wants this, because they don't have enough treasure hunting crews to put together, so they subcontract their lease site to other people, and they split that 80%. Each side gets 40. But then you got to wait for a division and the state to pick theirs. And so if you find it in the summer of 2025, you're probably not going to get paid until the summer of 2026.
It seemed that long.
Yeah, you got to go through the bureaucracy, red tape, and then you got to have the stuff come cleaned and all of that, because you don't want to bring up 1,000 silver coins that are encrusted in, they look black. You can't even tell them. That's why they call them Oreo cookies.
Yeah.
You have to have those things reverse osmosis taken in, and you have to clean them up and then value them and give them a fair market value so you guys can see. Because you're not going to take a small coin and compare it to a big coin, or one that has a lot of detail versus one that doesn't have a lot of detail. One's worth more than the other, and if you don't clean them, you'll never know. That takes a long process, and then you have to do a fair market evaluation of each and every coin before you do a division, and that's why it takes a year.
Okay. Yeah. So seemed to be a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork.
And it's a long process to do the conservation of these coins, and then you got to tag them, and you got to everything has to be in a database so that you don't lose track of it, and you know where you can prove it. And then you got to have the proof of provenance, because there's 1,000 coins millions of coins were made in Spain or the New World, but if it's not associated with a shipwreck, it's worth about 10% of the value of a coin that is associated. That very same coin associated with a shipwreck is worth 10 times the one that's not. So.
Okay, I understand. And I was also wondering, do you believe churches like Nazi gold and Templar relics? I mean, I'm very interested in history, as I told you, and this book I'm reading now is about the secrets of the Templars and the last basically stories about them. And the fleet from the Templars basically just disappeared. The ships, the whole armada. And it's said to believe that it might be in Portugal or in Scotland. or maybe
Hmm.
even Canada. Do you believe that the Templar treasure or Nazi gold or other?
I believe in all of it because man
Yes,
hasn't changed. And if the church is involved, I don't care which sector of the church, you know that there's money involved.
yes.
And there was a lot of behind the scenes taking place about the transfer of wealth. So, yes, I believe it. Where it all is, I don't know. I have an idea where, oh, maybe one thing is, but that's not what I've been dedicating myself to. But yes, I believe it. Uh, but it's also easy to make a story folklore about it based on
Exactly.
truth. So, unless you do your homework, you'll never really know. But do I believe that that took place? Absolutely. Do I
Okay.
believe in Nazi gold? Absolutely. That 100%. Do I believe in the Templars and golds and churches hiding it and moving it through people? Absolutely. I mean,
I believe it too.
man has proven himself not to change.
Very, very well said.
Can you imagine the amount of wealth that is going behind closed doors now between church and governments
It's so
today?
much. We will not even. We will not even. We
We're
cannot even
talking
understand.
trillions of dollars.
Yes,
Uh, so if it's happening today, it's just an extension of what happened in the past.
I totally agree. And I was wondering, maybe you can. What's the coolest artifact or treasure you found? If you can.
I always tell this to people, and I have to say it to you, it would be my wife. But besides
Good
that,
answer. Good
yes,
answer.
yes, it saves me in a lot of cases. I guess my favorite one I found was a Mayan pendant that a high priestess wore, and it had a brooch to it, so it attached to a chain, and I found it on a Spanish shipwreck. So normally that stuff would have been melted down by the Spanish and made into little gold ingots. This one wasn't. Whoever was on that ship and met their demise really liked that piece and tried to save it. So to
Wow.
find a 1,500-year-old artifact on a 400-year-old ship was pretty cool.
That's really cool. That's the
Yeah,
coolest thing I ever heard.
yeah, it was pretty neat.
And when you are, I know that in the series as well, just very fast. It can be very dangerous, the treasure hunting as well. I mean, you are below the sea, you can drown, you can have sharks, and you can have competition there. It's not the safest profession to do.
No, it's gotten safer now because of technology. By this very thing that I'm talking to you on, called my cell phone, I can get my GPS coordinates right in my hand. I can call somebody almost anywhere there's cell service. Uh, Whereas just going back to the 70s and 80s when I was working with my dad, there are many instances that I wish that we had cell phones because we would have. I've been in many storms where I didn't have cell phone service, and not long ago, just the early 2000s, I didn't have cell phone services wasn't spread throughout the Caribbean like it is today. We got caught in a hurricane. Um, the dangers of diving are not that much of a problem as is the weather associated with getting to and going back to any particular site. If there's a pending storm, you've got waves, you got out of nowhere comes a squall that could tear your boat apart. You got hurricanes and stuff like that. Now, there are some dangerous diving conditions, obviously, but usually it's in shallow water. I do
Yes.
shallow water wreck hunting. So if something happened to me at 25, 30 feet, let's just say my air hose blew and I couldn't, oh my God, what am I going to do? Well, I just push off the bottom and I can get up 25, 30 feet in a split second. So I'm not really worried about that. If I was diving in caves, definitely that's a game changer. But I don't dive caves because I'm not stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to live.
Yes, I don't find cave diving at all glorious or fun because I've done it one time and it all looks like mud. And I don't want to see mud. I'd rather see beautiful coral reefs with the gorgeous tropical fish swimming around and a pile of cannonballs or chain or ballast pile from an old shipwreck. I'm not going to find it inside of some cave that's 3 feet wide that I can't even fit through. And with all the dust there, I don't get the cave diving, but for those who love cave diving, go get it, but not for me. So I try not to put myself in dangerous positions. The most dangerous part about diving, the diving part, is getting on and off the boat.
Okay. Yeah.
because it's constantly moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you get hit by a 50-ton boat on top of your head, you're out.
Done. Yeah.
I have a better chance of that happening to me than I would getting eaten by a shark. So that's the truth of the matter. And I don't dive when it's rough and horrible out there, because getting on and off the boat is the worst part about it. Once you're in the water, you're okay. You can have 6-foot waves, but when you're down at the bottom, you don't feel them. They're nice. Everything's beautiful and calm. It's getting back up there and getting on the boat that will kill you. So that's it.
I did not know that. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking as well, if Gordon Cooper could see everything you accomplished since his passing, what do you think he would say to you?
Of what I've accomplished so far?
Yeah, you accomplished so much.
Well, I know he'd be proud, because it's something, one of the last things he said to me is finish what I couldn't, and do this, take this information and make good use of it. And so, yes, I think he would be proud. I think he'd also be saddened to know that the the ability to get leases in order to do this type of work has basically dried up. I think he would be saddened by that, but I don't think he'd be surprised by that, given that he used to work for the government. So I'm sure he knows all about that. Um,
Probably.
but yeah, would he be proud? I'm sure. Every time I dive or look for a shipwreck, I'm paying homage to him, not so much to my father, but him, my surrogate father, because he was the one who took his time. He was patient with me. He cared. If I had a personal problem, he'd sit and talk to me about it. He'd be like the dad that, would, if you had a problem with a girlfriend, you could tell the story to him, and he'd go, okay, here's what I would do. I couldn't do that with my real father, but with Gordon I could. So every time I do something, I think of him, and I also thank him. Go, God, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even be in this part of the world diving on this wreck. He may have not seen that one particularly, but because of him, that I was able to go to that area and look for it, because Gordon gave me also some very knowledgeable stuff about, you have to go with your gut instinct, know where the Spanish were, figure that shit out on your own, take the information I've given you, and then you're going to make more discoveries of your own if you take the information I have, which I have. So.
I think it's wonderful, and I think it shows so much in the series as well, how much you honor him and respect him, how much you cared for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Still do.
it's really nice.
I think about him every day. I really do. So, and I don't think about my dad every day, funny enough. But, I don't hate my dad. I don't wish anything negative. Wherever he is, he is. But, when I think of, if I'm missing something, I'm more likely to miss Gordon than I am my own father. So that's how important of a man he was to me.
Wonderful. And yeah. It's just, yeah. These questions I ask everyone who is guest on the podcast. So, what are your dreams and plans now in life?
My dreams and plans are to live to 110 and be able to walk and think sensibly. That's my dreams and plans. Whether that actually happens or not, don't know. Love to see my grandkids. It's a lot less about treasure than you would believe.
Yeah?
If you saw where I lived, and you wouldn't know I was a treasure hunter, because I'm not the kind of guy. My dad was just the opposite of me. And I probably do this because of the way he was. My house is not adorned with treasure. I don't have gold and silver and swords hanging and bottles and things like that hanging in my house, so that it's a representation of what I do. Because when I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm 100% in. But when I come home, I'm 100% into my family. So I don't like to mix the two. And whereas my dad, he was a complete show off. He had to show everybody how much gold and silver, and he wore jewelry and all of that. I'm exactly the opposite. So my dreams and goals are just to be happy and live a long, healthy life, and spend time with my kids and hope for grandchildren, believe it or not. But professionally, I would like to just make one final last big discovery, and hopefully, I would love to. One of my dreams would be to still be able to bridge that gap between the academic community and the scientific community and myself. I'm not that hopeful on that anymore, because as time goes by, I'm seeing how much more difficult that would be. But I guess one of my things is to make another discovery and share it with everybody, because I think, as I've seen how many people are fascinated with the Gordon Cooper story, I think that if I could tell another story and share it with people, I'd love to see people get excited about it, because I guarantee you in another 10, 15, 20 years for sure, there won't be treasure hunters telling their stories on social media or anything, because it'll all be illegal by then. So I'm one of the last few in this business, and everybody always asks me, Darrell, can you tell me how to become a treasure hunter? And I say, just don't become one. Don't make it your life's work. Make it a career. Make it a fun weekend thing. I can help you out there. But if you want to make it a career, run as fast as you can, because there's no future in it. I'm very straightforward with people. And they all get all bummed out. Oh, man, now you ruined my dreams. No, your dreams can continue, but make it a hobby. Because if
Okay.
you make it your career, there's nothing. It would be like taking you back to the Stone Age. I mean, we're not pounding stones with these big, large hammers to make little small pebbles out of them anymore. We have machines to do that. So I'm not going to suggest you be the guy that wants to make his career by pounding big boulders into little rocks, because the job doesn't, there's no marketplace for it. There is no job like that. It's the same thing, you know? So.
I want to become a treasure hunter, so I will keep your advices in my head.
Yeah, you can do it on your pastime for as a hobby. Go out on the weekends, learn how to identify man-made material versus nature-made material, and go after it. But if you want to make it a career, do something else. And I know that sounds weird coming from me. It's not me being selfish, because I'd love to be able to. If the world opened up to contracts, then I'd be telling people, yeah, you got to do this, because there's so much more to find.
It's so much, and when you think about Asia and I mean the whole world, it's huge. It has to be treasure all over the planet. So
All over the place. But the only stuff you hear about now is Mel Fisher's. Well, you hear about his past stories, not so much present day. You hear about 1715 Fleet, and you'll hear about a gentleman named Carl Allen who's working in the Bahamas, northern Bahamas, looking for the Nuestra Senora de Maravillas. Uh, Everything else that you hear about is scientific community or a government entity or an academic institution that's discovered something, because they're controlling that. Try to get a
yes,
permit anywhere in Europe. Impossible.
impossible. Okay.
Impossible. Never. You'll never get a shipwreck permit, a salvage permit in Europe, anywhere that I know of. Anywhere. You can't even go in the water looking like you're a treasure hunter. They'll suspect you of stealing and all of that. It's very
Oh,
difficult, especially in France and Spain, and it's impossible. Portugal's, whew, no way. They don't want any of that, but an academic institution can do it. That's why the only news that you hear is scientists from such and such a university have now discovered the oldest shipwreck ever known to man. Well, had you let other people do it, you know how many other things, we are much faster than they are. We are much
exactly.
more passionate than they are. Well, I don't know if we're more passionate. I give scientists and the people that are actually doing it some credit, that they are somewhat passionate about history, but their methodology is going to take too long. They have to wait through government red tape.
I also have one last question I always ask everyone, and fortitude means strength. What kind of methods or techniques have you relied on in your work and in your personal life?
Well, patience is probably the number one, because if you're not patient, you'll never be in this business. Also, you have to have a good understanding of history, and you have to be passionate about it. And you want to love history, even though it's ugly in some cases. But if you want to share it, you got to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. Share it with the rest of the world. Um, you got to have good support from family. That's for sure. You got to have good friends and a good team, good qualified people to work with. Technology's gotten a lot better, but still, I think one day somebody's going to come out with technology that can identify gold and silver like immediately,
Yes.
and not just have to go through iron and old, because 90% of the shipwreck is just ballast stones, cannons, anchors, shipwrecks, hardware, guns, and stuff like that, or armament. If somebody invents, which I'm sure somewhere out there it's already been invented, definitely by the government. However, if somebody is able to put that into the use with treasure hunting, it would be a game changer as far as finding stuff. So that's something that, you know, I'm trying to work with a few guys that, are tech guys to do that. And hopefully they'll be able to make a breakthrough where it can actually apply to what we're doing. And, like I said, the methodologies are the same as before. Never risk your human life to go after something just because it's gold or silver. Be very smart when you dive, and stay away from moving boats when you're coming up. And that's it. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
It's really not that much to think about.
And you mentioned also persistence and patience and consistency.
Yeah, because if you don't, and then you know what, find another way to make money too, because it's not it's not a get rich quick business. That's for dang sure. Everybody thinks, oh, you must be worth millions. I found millions in treasure, but I've had to give 90% of it away, either to governments or people that I was working with when I was younger, or my dad just took the stuff that I found away from me because he just felt he could. And, and then you spend more money trying to get a license than you do finding the treasure that you were so pursuant to get that license for. So very difficult. Even if you're permitted to get a license, the process is talk about having to have patience. It's not the patience of having to go out there and look for the treasure and hope you find it. It's having to deal with all the paperwork, even in a situation where you do get the permission to do so. So that's probably my biggest, that's the biggest, hardest thing to overcome, is dealing with people.
Yes.
And licenses and permits. It's just a lot of red tape, very difficult, and makes it very hard.
And it seems that yeah, like you said, so basically now we will have treasure hunting for maybe 10 or 20 more years, and then it's done. So,
at most, yeah. I mean, it's just going to be a dying industry because, first off, people aren't going to be able to afford it. Second off, governments are not going to want to work with anybody because they're getting pressure from other academic institutions not to allow this. And when they figure out, there's a way, maybe the government will pay them or these entities will pay them to stop. And they're like, let's just take the money up front and let's stop. However that happens, that's how it's ending, is by somebody else putting up some money, that you can pay off most of these poor countries by just shoving a bunch of money into their face. And the people who have the money are academic and other institutions. So we're not going to give them $1 million. Go, here's $1 million. Because then there's, oh, wait, thank you very much for that. Joe, it's your turn. And, you got to pay that guy and then this guy and that guy. And unfortunately, a lot of that stuff works like that. But it doesn't sound very positive.
no, we don't, but we still have some time, hopefully.
Yes.
So I would just say it was so incredible and an honor to have you on Fortitude and Flow, the
You're
podcast.
welcome.
So thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome. And let me know when you're in Madrid. Catch a beer.
I will be there in 3 weeks, so definitely will do.
Awesome. Okay, man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This episode is dedicated to the memory of Gordon Cooper and in honor of Darrell Miklos. If you liked this episode, it would mean a lot if you liked, shared, and subscribed, and left a comment with any ideas how to improve the podcast. All of this would really help the podcast grow. Thank you for your support.